Drink? If you offered me a scotch and plain water, I could drink a scotch and plain water.
That aboard, Lieutenant. Make it yourself like a good chap, will you?
Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Growing Up Punk podcast. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. We love getting to do this show. We love getting to talk with each other about bands that we love. We love getting to talk with you about bands that have influenced us. And we also love talking to other people that are in the music scene. Maybe they're not necessarily musicians, but they have played a big part in music in different ways. And today that is the creative way of art. And as you all know, art plays a big part in music. We all love, CD and vinyl covers and the art that goes with it. We love show posters and all that kind of stuff. And so today it's cool to have an artist guest on the show, and I will get to that in a minute. Before that, if you like what we are doing and you want to get more involved in the podcast, then please go to our website, growingpunkpod.com. There you will find everything you need to connect with us further, to send us your input, to check out our merch store, to go to our YouTube and all that other stuff. If you like diving deep into music and into interviews and video and artwork and all that kind of cool stuff, then check that out. We post music reviews and a bunch of things that keep us connected to the music that we love. So please go check us out there, and we are very thankful for that. So today we are talking with John Nissen. You might not know that name. Maybe you do if you're like me and David. And over the years, as we've gotten into music and CDs, we've mentioned many times how we'll pore over the liner notes and, see who's produced the albums, who's done the art, what are the bands that they're thanking, all that kind of good stuff. Then maybe you will recognize this name because he is the creator of the MXPX, which is the classic MXPX Punkhead logo that originally was first printed or used for art on MXPX's 1994 release, Pokinatcha. And so John's been around, for a long time. That album came out in 1994. And he's been doing artwork for them as well as lots of other bands and companies and stuff since then. So we had a really interesting conversation just about how we originally got connected with MXPX and, some of the Tooth and Nail bands and just kind of how that all kind of worked together. It's a really interesting conversation. This is a talk and questions that I've had for many years. And so it was a huge joy to take the time to talk with John and kind of hear his thoughts on music and MXPX in particular. Another logo he created that maybe you're not aware of is the classic Tooth and Nail logo, which I think I had known, but maybe I forgot. And so when he let me know that this week, I was just super excited about that. That classic Tooth and Nail logo and the MXPX Punkhead are, for me anyways, and I'm sure many others, like the two most kind of iconic music logos. And so, just really, really cool to talk with John and hear his journey on, how he got into music and how he got into art and kind of his journey since then. But we mostly touch on the things relating to MXPX to go along with our series of theirs. And so lots of really cool details in there. After my talk with John, he had sent me an email just wanting to kind of clarify some of his thoughts. So often what can happen when we're doing a podcast, we're having this conversation, sometimes the communication isn't as clear. Maybe the questions I'm asking aren't, as clear or to the point as they can be. And sometimes just when you're having a conversation, you get, not confused, but maybe you say things and it's like, oh, actually that wasn't correct, or, you remember details later on, or whatever the case is. So there was a few things that John just wanted to clarify, just so that there weren't any things in there that kind of came off, how they weren't intended. And so I'm just going to briefly touch on those things, and you'll kind of, as you listen to the interview, when these questions come, then you can kind of, just understand that there was maybe some miscommunication. So one of those was I had asked him, just was there any contracts between him and Tooth and Nail or the bands, back in the early 90s, and he said that was one of the things that kind of took longer to happen. It wasn't really until later on that he realized that, contracts are a necessary thing. Back then it was like, oh, awesome, this band wants to use my artwork. Cool, here we go. There wasn't as much, contractual agreements and that. And so he just kind of wanted to clarify that took a while, that there wasn't, much contracts with Tooth and Nail. However, with the bands, that did come kind of over time. And so that's just kind of part of the music industry as well. And so you can kind of take that for what it's worth. He also did clarify that he did receive payment for the Pokinatcha original art. In the interview, you will hear that he says that he originally didn't get paid for that, but that when he went back to his records, he actually did. And again, that was one of those things where he was just really excited to do it. So it's not out of bitterness or anything or resentment that that he talks about not getting paid. It was just one of those things back then that you didn't really think about because he was just excited to have a band like MXPX use his artwork. We also, I had asked him if he was into any kind of newer music, and I maybe didn't quite clarify what I meant by that, and so his answer maybe didn't quite represent what his actual thoughts were on if he's still connected with new music. And so he in fact is, and I think in the interview he maybe says he's not as up to date on music, but he just misunderstood my question. And so I think that's it. If there's anything else, leave us a comment, send us a message, and we can clarify that for you if you like. But other than that, please enjoy my interview with John Nissen. So what was the first band that you remember really liking and being into?
Oh, gosh. I would say I grew up like a lot of kids in my area, where I grew up kind of listening to the classic rock station. The first band that I thought, oh, that's my favorite band, was the Scorpions.
Nice.
And yeah. And it was like, I think it was because that Blackout album just was so good, and like the album cover was so iconic with the forks in the guy's eyes and he was screaming, and so then once I got that, I went back and found earlier music, and the two albums before that are just great, and I still every once in a while will put those on, and they're pretty fun. So but then as I grew up and just discovered more and more music, and it became like my thing to just explore what was out there and not wanting to ever settle for what was spoon fed me.
Right.
I started to get into new wave, and hardly anybody in my small town was listening to that stuff. And then eventually I started to, I bought some books that kind of explained like the history of that kind of music and all these alternative, bands and what influenced them. And so I started going back, and there was no way to preview this stuff,
Right. Yeah, of course.
So you kind of had to buy it blind, as far as you just assumed you might like it. And it was a big risk because you're a kid, you don't have a lot of expendable income. And I think then I started to get into bands that sort of blew my mind, like the Plasmatics and Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, and then I went back even further and was like, okay, who influenced those guys? And then I explored to like the Ramones and Sex Pistols and New York Dolls and the Clash and just and the Stooges. I mean, that stuff is just incredible, and I'll still put on the Stooges every once in a while, and just absolutely love it. So,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's definitely like kind of a step even further back than than a lot of the. So I'm not trying to say you're old. I guess I mean.
Well, I am. So.
Well, yeah, maybe you're older than the typical kind of band guy I talk to, and so it's cool hearing, about those bands that really started it all. Did you get to see any of those bands? Like, were they coming through your area?
Yeah. So I guess probably the ones that stand out the most are like Black Flag. I saw a couple times when Henry Rollins was their singer. And I saw Husker Du a bunch of times. I saw GBH. I was fortunate to live pretty close to Portland, Oregon. I lived near Vancouver, Washington, and it was just a little bit of a drive to Portland. And once me and my friends got our driver's licenses, it was just like we would try to go to every show we could because it was just so fun.
Yeah.
Seeing all those bands and during that time, it was like the mid '80s, and the hard fast rules type of ethos was going on, which is, I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like who can play the hardest, the fastest,
right? Yeah.
Sort of dominated, and out of that came some really great bands. And then I became just a huge fan of the local guys because, like I said, I was always looking for something that was a little different and a less, even less mainstream. So, fortunately, I was near Portland, which meant I got to see Poison Idea a bunch of times and The Accused from Seattle. And those were my two favorite local bands.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. That's so cool to hear that. Have you kept up with punk music, or was that era of punk, kind of your thing, and then, once it became maybe a bit more commercial or mainstream, did you lose interest in that, or what's your musical kind of interest and scope in kind of between then and now?
I held on to a lot of that, but as the years went on, I probably, just because of circumstances, within the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, I've kind of gotten a little bit away from the really tapping into what was going on. I feel pretty lost right now as far as what's the newest things. But before that, I was pretty dialed into what was going on, and a lot of just great bands, came out later. It's, but it wasn't always a straight ahead punk rock or whatever, but I liked anything. I just have a pretty diverse, taste in music. Yeah. And even when I was in high school hearing reggae for the first time, it was like, what is this? This is awesome. Stuff like that. And so as we went on into the early 90s and the alternative music was just exploding, that was just incredible time to be around. And then I had moved to Seattle for art school, and so I was right there, pre grunge explosion.
Wow, that's crazy.
And I was still going to shows, but I was underage, and unlike Portland, Seattle had this crazy dance hall ordinance that kept anyone from having all age shows there. And so we had to drive to Tacoma which is a little bit of a drive. And it was sad because we were right near downtown. I mean, we were basically in downtown, and we couldn't go to the shows around there. But I ended up seeing like Soundgarden in 1986.
Wow.
It was like they were just young and they were an opening band, type of thing. So,
Right. Man, that's crazy.
yeah.
Man, that's really neat. So what made you want to pursue art? Like what made you want to go to art school? And what do you kind of remember about first wanting to become an artist? Like, were you drawing as a kid, or was there something specific that kind of shifted in you that made you want to pursue art, or what happened with that?
I've always liked creating things, and whether it was, drawing or pasting together boxes to make a spaceship for my Star Wars figures, because I couldn't afford the Star Wars ship at the store,
Yeah.
I always loved, creating, and I think the thing that was really good for me was my parents were really encouraging, and also like my teachers. I remember, having, my art put up on the wall, and being proud of that or whatever when I was in second grade or something.
Yeah.
And so it kind of went from there. And then as I got into high school, I was still drawing a lot, and I would do it at home after I got my homework done, and I would just look forward to it at night. And I wasn't like the best artist in my classes in high school. Like there was guys that were way better, but it never stopped me from having that passion for it.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to go to a university, so all my classes were kind of prepping me for that. But I wasn't a good student, and I struggled. And so I was like, I really wish there was a school I could go to where I'd have to take all this other stuff,
Yeah.
And so I didn't think that really existed. And then I think it was my junior year, maybe, or senior year of high school, a representative from the Art Institute of Seattle came and talked to our class, and they did a good job because I was, in a little while I was driving to go visit that school, and I went with my friend, and he got a ride with some adult that took us, and when I heard it, and I saw the school and all that kind of stuff, and I saw the level of quality that was the student work, I was sold. And I came back to my parents. I said, "Can we afford this? Because I want to go here."
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, I think we can swing it because it's only 2 years." And so I got to go to art school, and the thing was, I had no idea what a career in art even looked like. I had no idea at that point. There just wasn't as many ways, I think, to find out about that kind of stuff either. Like,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And so, it was a good place for me to be because they taught us all sorts of stuff, and it was from the ground up. There's such a variety of classes, and it was pretty much a crash course because it was like 2 years straight, 20 credits every quarter, and hardly any breaks. But when I came out, it was kind of like a trade school because you were being prepared for a job,
Right. Like they set you up kind of with like a co-op program or something, like where they guarantee you a job, or?
No, it's more like they were teaching you the skills to actually get a job, whereas I feel like a lot of maybe fine art degrees and stuff don't have that focus, you know.
Oh, I see.
And those are fine too, but this was very focused on visual communications, you know. So, you know, so it was good because I came out of that with a little bit of an idea of what I might be able to do to make a living.
Yeah.
And then, so I was fortunate to get a job after that. But yeah, I think that's kind of the process that got me to that point. I felt like it might be my plan A with no plan B type of thing. Like,
right.
I better put it all into this because this might be my only chance.
Yeah.
Type of thing.
Yeah. Did you find that your passion for music changed at all when you went to art school? Did those kind of go hand in hand, or was it, you know, okay, now I'm in art school, this is what I'm going to focus on, you know, music might still be there, but, or were you still, you know, going to shows and all that?
Yeah. I feel like it just kept going because, you know, every project I could squeeze some kind of band promotion into, or you know, squeeze my love of music into the project, I would.
Yeah.
Even in high school, you know, I was doing that, but even more in art school because, you know, a lot of times you get to pick what your subject matter is, and it was what I was thinking about all the time, and like I said, we would go pretty often to shows, and you know, it was just the thing we did for fun, you know.
Yeah. So is that when you would have met MXPX, or how did you initially get connected with them, and what year would have that been?
So I don't know how deep you want me to go into the story, but
yeah, the more,
like how far back,
the more cool info, the better.
Okay. So I graduated, and during my college years, I kind of had you know, like I don't know, like I had always grown up going to church, because that's what my family did and everything. But I wouldn't have called myself a Christian. But then when I got to college, it was like I finally got a chance to decide for myself, you know, what I wanted to do. And so I committed my life to you know, to Jesus and to Christianity. And but I still kept going to all those shows and like all that stuff. It didn't really change my love of music. And so, but there was that sort of inner conflict with it, you know, because a lot of the stuff they were talking about didn't align with my new faith or whatever. So, as the years went on, and I got married, and I got married in 1990, and then, you know, I kept trying to find music that, you know, aligned with my faith and also was good, you know, like what I liked before. And so I went to I think one show for the Crucified.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I fell in love with the Crucified because it was like, oh, there's people like this out there making this kind of music. Like, these are my people. This is insane. Like, I didn't know anything about any of that world before that. And so when I was there, I started to get, you know, they would hand out flyers at these shows for the next shows or whatever. So you kind of get into this world when you poke your toe into it, you know?
Yeah.
And so one of the bands that opened for them was Blenderhead, and I started to see them around town. Like I went to a few more of their shows, and I noticed that I really liked their music, but I didn't think their visuals held up to the music.
Yeah.
And so I designed a T-shirt and I mocked it up, and I found their address in a fanzine, and I wrote to them, and I sent the T-shirt, and I said, "Hey, I did this for you. I don't know if you'd want it or not or whatever, but you can have it if you want," and that kind of stuff. And so that's how I met Billy Power, who ended up was pretty foundational in the beginnings of Tooth and Nail Records.
Definitely.
Yeah, and he was the one that sort of convinced Brandon to even move the operation to Seattle, and so once I knew Billy, he was very connected with all the other musicians in Seattle who were Christians, and there was like this little scene that I was so glad to find, and so through him, I ended up doing his album cover, and it was all about the same time when I was working on his Blenderhead cover, and Tooth and Nail was starting to sort of develop their presence or whatever in Seattle, and so at the same time, my wife and I would go to these little house shows, and one of those house shows, MXPX played. I had no idea who they were or whatever. It was like they brought in their gear. They were just these young kids. They were, I think they were about 16 or 17 something like that at the time. And I remember leaving that first night after I saw them the first time, and we're walking to the car, and I said to my wife, there's a lot of great bands in this scene, but those guys are going to go somewhere.
Man, that's awesome. I love that. That's so cool. Just knowing that you were there since the beginning, like, man, that's so rad.
Yeah, I'm so glad I got to, be there for that. And then I had talked to them, once, like while they're loading up their gear at the end of a show or something, and met Mike, I think. And I told him I was an artist, and, if he wanted some help or whatever. And, I'm sure a lot of people did that. He's like very nice, but okay, whatever, never followed through with it or whatever. And then Brandon liked the art for Blenderhead so much that he asked me if I would work on MXPX's first album. And so that's kind of how I got connected with them.
Oh, okay. Kind of around the back door.
Yeah, it was all through Tooth and Nail, through Brandon. So
yeah. So what was that first piece of art they asked you to create, or did Brandon just say, I've got this new band, kind of draw something up, or how did that all piece together?
Yeah.
Did you have much direction on what they were looking for, or?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I talked to Mike Herrera on the phone and asked him a bunch of questions, and kind of got a feel for maybe a direction I could go. And I sketched up some stuff and showed it to him. But that original conversation, I remember asking him, like, what are some album covers you like, or what is, some kind of style you like, or whatever. And through the process of that conversation, he had mentioned Screeching Weasel, how they had the weasel character,
Right, yeah.
And during that same time, I worked at this large sportswear company, and we were doing these fake mascots for, fake teams or whatever. Like I don't remember why, but we would make up these team names and then we would do like a mascot for them. And I thought that was fun. And I thought, well, what if a band had a mascot? It was kind of like, like a sports mascot, like and so I kind of approached it that way. And I sketched out this first little sketch in my sketchbook. And I remember, I think I went to the studio when they're recording Pokinatcha. I think I met them there that night, and Brandon was there. And I think I showed it to him. I still have that sketch anyway, but I think I showed it to them and they liked it. And I was like, okay, well, you want to go this way? And they're like, yeah. And so I went back and started to develop this logo. But I being a professional designer had this idea of, well, maybe I should try to make it like really professional, really, really nice. And so I changed the character a lot. And then I think I mocked it up and actually colored it all with colored pencils and all this kind of stuff, I think. And I'm pretty sure I sent that to Mike or something. And he's like, no, this is not what you showed me. I'm like, oh, he's like, go back to that original sketch. And I'm like, oh, you just want me to refine that doodle? And he's like, yeah. And so that's where, the original Pokinatcha character pose came from. Was like, I tried to basically recreate the sketch I had done, but just really refine it and clean it up instead of completely changing the character to something different, like I had tried to do. But there was a lot of things that went into that. I mean, there's a lot of things that went into the different aspects of that album cover, influences and stuff like that. But I don't know how much detail you want me to get or whatever.
Well, I'm curious now as to what was that design that they rejected. Like, in what direction was it from what we now know as PXPX? Like, how different was it from that?
Well, it was more realistic proportions of a person.
Oh, I see.
It didn't. Yeah, I'm so glad he made me go back to the drawing board, because I ended up refining that one and used it for something else later. I think it's even on my Instagram way back when I was going through and just finding old stuff to post. But yeah, we used it for like a t-shirt for a music club in Portland and stuff like that. Because I liked it enough to develop it even further. But, I'm so glad he made me go back to the drawing board, because obviously we wouldn't have the PXPX that we have now.
Yeah, well, that's just cool that it was kind of a collaboration. They had their ideas and you had yours, and because sometimes it's so much more the one way, where the band is just like, this is what we want, don't do anything else, or the artist the same thing. And so it's kind of cool that you brought something different. You said no, go back. And I mean, obviously at the time you had no idea how iconic that logo would become. So that's cool that it worked out that way. So when you designed that, was it just kind of like, this is a one-time thing for this CD cover, or were they interested in, turning this into something else, or did that kind of happen over time?
I think the only thing I was thinking was, I want to do something really, obviously this is one of the few, album covers I've actually worked on, and I was so in love with music, and I just loved the whole culture of the whole entire thing. And plus it was punk rock, and just, it was like a dream job. And I just put my heart into it, you know, and it didn't matter. I really didn't think that wasn't looking beyond just one album cover and some merchandise, you know. And I knew from working at a sportswear company what would work good on merchandise.
Right.
You know, I knew it had to be bold, simple, clean. I also grew up just in love with, you know, stuff like the Black Flag logo, or the Dead Kennedys.
Yep.
And those are the things that even I think were the first time I really, really understood even the power of a logo, you know, because those are so simple and easy to draw on your peachy or whatever when you're a kid.
Right.
You know, and I grew up drawing all those logos and other band logos when I was a kid on my stuff. And I wanted to do something that might possibly be iconic like that. And so for the most part, the head is pretty simple. I mean, but, you know, because I had to put a body on it, I had to do it a little more complicated than what somebody would just be able to sketch from memory or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But that was what I was striving for. And the simple block colors, you know, because that's what we had to do in screen printing. It was like you didn't.
Oh yeah.
And plus I was just learning to use a computer. I mean, the Blenderhead cover was the first time I ever did an illustration on the computer, and that was right prior to the MXPX, and I just purchased my own home computer. You know, they weren't common back then, and so it was the first job I even did on my own computer, I think. And so I was just learning Illustrator, and I don't know. It was a fun process, and it was very educational, but it was also a lot of work, and I put a lot of heart into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, you do that on lots of things, and most don't ever have the longevity, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Do you remember what you got paid to do that artwork back then? Because that was in '94. That album came out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what was the going rate for artwork back then?
I would say $0. I think that those early days, I was just so excited to be contributing to this thing that was going on, like this exciting new scene. And I just didn't care. I mean, but then after you put all this work into it, and you realize the thing you've actually created is actually worth something,
right?
Then you start to have second thoughts about it. But and later down the road, we got into a few we got into a dispute over some of that stuff. But at first, you know, it was we were just all kids having fun. You know, it was Brandon started the company when he was 23. I started doing stuff for him when I was 26. You know, the band was 9 years younger than me. I mean, we were just in it for the love of the thing. And so, but as time went on, you know, we started to learn that we had to have contracts.
Right.
And stuff like that. But in those early days, there was no contracts or anything.
Yeah. Well, I guess because Tooth and Nail was so early on too, like Brandon, I'm just assuming, was probably like, well, this guy wants to do this art. Like, you know, he's excited about it. So, you know, I'll let him do it, kind of thing. And maybe he wasn't as on top, obviously, as over the years of paying artists. And I don't know, maybe I'm just assuming that, but I guess, you know, you're both kind of starting, like you said, you're both excited about it. And I know that happens lots in music and art where, you know, you kind of trade back and forth until you realize, like, okay, I should probably be getting paid for this because I'm trying to make a living at it and trying to be professional. And so that's that's interesting. And so did that just kind of keep, so Pokinatcha comes out, and then, like, were you doing merch and stuff for them, or when they went into the studio to do Teenage Politics, they hit you up again? How did that kind of relationship kind of progress after that first album art?
I just want to reiterate that I don't hold any of that time against anybody. Like, I
for
was
sure.
totally fine with it. I think, well, I was going through some life changes because I think it was like the same week that Pokinatcha released. I think we had our first kid, my wife and I, and so and then it wasn't long after that I got a job and we moved to Salem, where I'm now. And so there's a lot of changes going on. And so I kind of just depended on the guys just to, like, ask me to do stuff. And I was starting to do freelance for more other bands and record labels and stuff like that during that time. And I stayed pretty busy. I mean, I still had a full-time job, and I would come home and always have a list of things to do when I got home too, for designs and juggling it all. I didn't really have time to self-promote, it was just coming at me. And so, yeah, Brandon ended up, I think, approaching me to do Teenage Politics. And again, I think, or Mike, maybe it was Mike Ferrer, I don't know. But anyway, one of them. And then I talked to Mike and I have some sheets where he wrote out all the meanings of the songs that were going to be on it, so I could have it.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
awesome.
handwritten notes about what each song is about. And so I had to kind of go off of that and try to figure out what would be a concept that would work with it. And I have never got the answer to this question, but I sort of assumed that maybe Teenage Politics wasn't necessarily a good thing. And so I thought, well, having the punk smash the letters would be cool. And so I drew up a couple sketches again, and I like printed them. I copied them and then colored them with colored pencils and markers and sent them off to the guys, and they picked one, and that's what we went with. And then I refined that like crazy, and that's where Teenage Politics came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's such an iconic CD cover. I mean, as all of them that you did, I remember that one specifically. I was at a bookstore with my family or whatever, going to pick out a tape, and Teenage Politics was sitting there, and it immediately caught my eye. And this was still when my parents were kind of like dictating what I listened to or said yes or no to what I could get. And so for some reason, my mom didn't like that cover. So just so you know, that I'm sure when you created that, you weren't thinking this might offend some people. And I don't think she was offended. It was probably just like, I don't know about that one. So that's
funny.
So it was probably, I don't know, a year or two after, where it was just like, I'm going to get this anyways. And
yeah, I love hearing those stories because I actually had it in my mind when I did those album covers that I wanted them to jump off the shelf. You know,
well, especially with that bright green. Yeah,
that's why those first two and the Blenderhead cover are so bright.
Yeah,
and I didn't think there was anything wrong with that as far as being punk rock, because I had grown up with these Black Flag album covers that were super bright and straight out of the tube type of colors,
Yeah.
And so, and plus during that time was the big, rock rock poster explosion that was happening, and a lot of those posters were printed with fluorescent inks and stuff, and I really dug that look. But of course we couldn't afford to do fluorescent inks on a CD cover, but I was trying to make them as bright as possible. And like, even with Pokinatcha, you know, the blue and the red, when you put the right blue and the right red together, it makes your eyes kind of vibrate. Like, and so I had played with op art like that before. And so I was trying to do that there. And then like with the Teenage Politics, that background is stolen straight out of something that would be on one of those old rock posters that had the radiating, you know, rays and stuff like that.
Yeah, almost kind of like hippie art or like 3D or something, like that kind of trippiness. And oh yeah, that's awesome. So as MXPX kind of were growing around this time, did you notice, you know, this logo becoming more popular, or was there, because there was no social media or really any way to know that, in your mind, was it like, oh cool, they're using it for a second album, you know, I'm happy to do it? Like, was it, you know, was it becoming iconic then yet, or when did you kind of notice that, like, or was that, you know, a ways down the road?
Yeah, I mean, at first, you know, in our little Northwest scene, I knew that they were popular, and people, if they found out I did the art, they were impressed or whatever, and it was like, oh, that, you know, that's awesome and all this kind of stuff. But I didn't understand the reach that MXPX was having. You know, I was, like I said, I was so busy raising my kid and like, you know, with my head down working, that I don't know. And how would I even know that kind of stuff? There was no social media. Yeah. There was nobody reporting back to me saying, hey, MXPX had a sold out show in blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, I had no idea what was going on. And I would say, I don't know when I really realized, but I started seeing people getting tattoos of it.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
And I think that was like an indication that, oh, this is bigger. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than maybe even the band. Like, this is a weird thing, you know? But I love it. I absolutely love it. And I'm glad that I was able to be a small part of that. But yeah, without social media, it was only, I think I was pretty much a online hermit, you know, until like, I think it was 2014, late 2014, I got an Instagram, and I had never had a social media before that.
Yeah.
And I still don't have Facebook or anything, but I started getting people messaging me or commenting on my posts and saying that, you know, that they grew up, you know, drawing the punk on their peaches and stuff, just like I did with those other bands back when I was a kid. And that blew my mind. And I kind of feel like that's like almost the most, almost the biggest compliment I could get.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that was definitely me. I've still got some of my high school binders with band names, and I mean that punk head is definitely right in the middle of that, and so that's so cool. Yeah, how do you feel about, you know, seeing those tattoos? You know, I've seen a lot of them as well. I've got one of them myself, so thanks for that. So I've seen a lot that, you know, that aren't done great, and some that are done amazing. You know, maybe this is a weird question, but like, how do you feel when you see a tattoo of your artwork where it's like, oh, that does not look how it's supposed to? Or is it just kind of like, well, I guess it's that person's not problem, but that was their, you know, depiction of it or whatever.
Yeah. The artist part of me and the designer cringes at a lot of the quality, for sure. But, you know, I've just learned to just enjoy it for what it is, and just be thankful that, people would want to put that on their body forever. And, I wish that they would, go to a better tattoo artist, but that's none of my business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
but I love it.
So I gotta ask, do you have the PXPX tattooed on you?
No, I don't have any tattoos actually.
Okay, man, that one's not iconic enough to get, or you're just not into tattoos, or it's weird to get your own art on you, or what?
Well, I think it would be kind of weird to get my own.
Oh, imagine how cool that'd be. Someone would be like, "Hey, cool MXPX tattoo," and you'd be like, "Yeah, I designed this thing 30 years ago. You owe me."
Yeah,
it's like walking around with a crown on. Yeah, I guess that's just such an interesting dynamic. I mean, it took me longer than I wanted to get that one, but it's still one of my favorite ones. And I remember seeing. I mean, Mike had it, way back when, and I started seeing other bands getting it on them, and yeah, it's just such a. Anytime I see it, even if it's done poorly, it's still like, okay, that's an MXPX fan, so I got a friend. But that design has now been used, in so many pieces of merch, including the first piece of merch I ever owned, and I actually still have that sweater. From posters to art to tattoos to beer cans and so many things in between. Looking back at all those things, what are some of your favorite items that design has been on? And do you collect those? Or do you just kind of leave that for other people to do?
I don't collect them. Maybe I should. I really enjoyed seeing the plushie that MXPX made.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
A while back. That was cool. I have that. Also. I'm trying to think.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, they're still making merch with it on there, so maybe you're just so used to seeing it that you just don't really care anymore. I
think what if I could ask that question or answer that question a little bit differently?
Yeah, for sure.
It's like I really, really like that some of the designers that I really respect have drawn it in their own take on it. Like, even if it's just like, kind of a throwaway doodle or whatever, like Chris Sherry. I mean, one day I opened up Instagram and he had done one of his marker drawings of the punk. And I was just floored. I was like, this is crazy. This is a guy that I look up to in so many ways. And he's drawing the character. And there's a guy who, that curates these art shows, and he's asked me to be a part of a bunch of them. And he is also an artist, and he works for Disney Animation, and he drew the punk a bunch of times on these designs or whatever. His name's Shogren, he goes by. And so stuff like that, I think, is really, I don't know if it really answers your question, but I think that that's the kind of stuff I really enjoy seeing.
Yeah, no, well, that's awesome. It's cool to hear your take on that. So you've done lots of representations of the PXPX, jumping, running, skateboarding on a Vespa. Do any of those stand out to you from one to the other? Is one more recognized than the other? Or again, is it just another way to kind of incorporate this design and it's all kind of the same to you?
Yeah, I think years ago I tried to sort of distance myself from that original Pokinatcha pose because it's weird proportions, and I don't know. It's just odd looking. But as I have gotten older and realized the appeal of it, I think that is probably my favorite. I did a cleaned up, sort of refined new version of it for Left Coast Live, that record.
Yeah.
And I think that's the version I probably like. It's the same pose, but I cleaned it up quite a bit, and ended up. I started putting type on the sole of the foot.
Yeah, I love that.
During Teenage Politics, and so on that one, I put MXPX on the sole of his shoe and gave him long pants and put a skull on his shirt and stuff like that. So I think that might be my favorite pose.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I'll have to, we actually just talked about that album last night on the podcast. It's not out yet. It will be by the time this comes out. But
okay.
Yeah, I don't, because I don't know if that one was released on CD. I think it was just DVD and then streaming. So I'm going to have to go back and check that out on there, because, yeah, that's really cool. Just going back again to the drawing, yesterday I was just telling my 8-year-old son that I was talking to the guy that designed the MXPX logo, and so he's like, "Oh, can you look up a picture of that so I can draw it?" And so I Googled it, and he was super excited to draw it. I mean, it looks pretty bad. I mean, he's 8, but it just I don't know, something about it just made me so happy to be like, "Oh man, this is so cool." Now my son is, he sees the logo all the time, on my CDs, and the tattoo on my leg, and so that was just kind of a funny little thing that now that's a part of his creative journey. So
I know that a lot of, the biggest amount of credit goes to the band, who has worked so hard and to keep the music fresh and alive, and keep their thing going. And that would be the biggest amount of credit goes to why the punk is still around. At all,
for sure.
But I feel like also, do you feel like it kind of, I don't know, when I see people with a tattoo of it or something, I think it represents a certain attitude that is maybe punk rock, but positive punk rock kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just observed that. I think it's kind of an icon that represents a positive kind of punk vibe.
Yeah. MXPX has always, kind of had that positive, side to them, and so, lots of people that I know that are into MXPX, are definitely positive type people, and that's kind of a cool, a cool thought. I've never really thought about that before. So, but yeah. So speaking of that logo, I'm really curious as to, when you create something, whether it's this or anything else, do you own the logo, or is it one somebody has, paid to use it, then they're free to use it, as much as they want for however long they want? Or because you've kind of used, the PXPX character in, other forms of art, and so what's that kind of dynamic between those two, and kind of what's allowed or what you can do? Or you're the artist, so you just have freedom to do whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. There was a time when MXPX left Tooth and Nail, and everything was kind of getting disputed during that time, right before slowly going the way of the buffalo type of era, and they, each side kind of tried to drag me into it, and in relation to the character, and I kind of got, at first I was interested to try to, see if I had any rights, and then, eventually I got tired of it and decided this is not gonna get me anywhere. And so I said, you guys can go ahead and fight it out. I'm out.
Yeah.
And I never really knew how it had been settled. And even today, I don't really know, and I don't really know if it matters as far as they are concerned and I'm concerned. If they do care, they probably should talk to me. But the thing is that what with a stand I've taken is that that I will not do anything that I think will upset them. Or cross a certain line. So, in other words, if the punk looks too much like the real punk, then I've either done it for them or I've done it for fun. So, like for instance, I did the punk as a Cupid, and I did him as an elf. Well, they did end up taking that elf and using it on stuff, but the Cupid they never did, and it was fine because it's kind of stupid looking. But I just wanted to do that for fun, but he has the exact same face, as the Pokinatcha Punk. Whereas when somebody will ask me for to do a commission for them, if it's a one-off, one piece of art that they're paying me for, like an original piece of art, I think that's okay. I can make it look like the real punk. If I'm doing it for something that is if a customer owns a business, this has happened a few times where they're like, hey, I love the character, I want to use it for my business, and I'll say, well, we can't do that, but you can have me do this. And so I don't know, you can bring up specific things if you want to ask me about them, but there's been so many that I don't really know how to answer that question. But that's generally, I've put up kind of like rules for myself and things I won't do, and those are just kind of my own guidelines that nobody really imposed on me, but those are the ones that I have imposed myself.
No, that's fair. It's just kind of a unique thing because most band logos, it's just for that. You don't really see like the Blink 182 rabbit or used in other things, and it's like, oh, is that a Blink thing? No, it's something totally different. Like, oh. But whereas this, so that's why I was curious, just going through your Instagram and seeing it used for different things. I was just curious, is that just you playing around and using it, or other places, or are you selling it to someone else, or whatever, all that stuff. So, but that's cool. That it's such a versatile piece of art.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't. Yeah, there's certain things I just won't do, but others, probably looks like I am, doing something. But like, for instance, when that guy Sjogren approached me, he's curating these art shows, and he's like, I just love that character. Can you do a mashup? And that's the other thing I should mention is I started mashing it together with other characters. So like when I saw other fan art and people doing things in other not related to this, but in other characters, they were mashing them together. And I was like, oh, I could do that with the punk. And so the first one I did was Darth Vader with the Pokinatcha Punk. And I did that just purely for fun, and then I showed it to MXPX, and they actually did end up printing it on some shirts, and so I made a little bit of money on that. But and then I ended up making some prints for people, but that I feel like because of this whole era we're in where fan art is a thing and you can get away with, drawing Mickey Mouse in your own style if you do it enough like your own style, and you can even sell it on stuff if you're careful.
Yeah, I was going to ask how that works with copyrights and.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a gray area right now because I would have never thought that was okay, but people are getting away with it, and so I was like, well, if other people are going to do this with characters they don't even know, have any right to, I should probably be able to do it with the Pokinatcha Punk and mash it with something else, and if I don't make a lot of money on it, it's not going to bother anybody.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
And so it's kind of become a hobby and also something that I can do for fun,
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah, so the last 2 years you've been working on the posters for these MXPX shows. They've been doing, kind of weekends, and I mean, these posters are incredible. It's, it's taken that PXPX and just, timesing it by 1,000 because there's so much more room on a poster to create. And so I would love to hear kind of what inspires those posters. How much freedom do you have to create those? And okay, yeah, what's the inspiration behind those? Because they're so cool.
Okay, I don't do those.
Oh,
that's the first way I could answer that question.
Oh, okay. Well, my mistake. Or maybe did you just post them on your Instagram? And because are they on there or no? I thought I saw them on there.
No. So pretty much if it's not on my website or on my Instagram, I probably did not do it. So that's a guy named Justin Gray. He's incredible. I really like his stuff, but yeah, he does those, and I believe he's done the last few singles for MXPX.
I see.
The Fever Dream and Life in Quarantine covers.
Oh, okay.
So they work with him too. I don't have any part of that part. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. My mistake on that, I guess. To rephrase that, how do you feel seeing, your character in those? And I guess back to the other question, like, so that's okay for another artist to, to represent the PXPX in a different way.
Well, yeah, nobody asked me my permission to start with, but I've learned over the years to just relax on a lot of that stuff. I mean, I've never gotten anywhere with trying to control things.
Yeah, that's fair.
In my career, working for other people, you kind of have to learn to release to a certain extent your control over stuff. And, I generally, I really like what he's doing with it. I would do the characters a little bit different, but that's me because that's just that's how I am. That's my preference. But I think the approach that I still take to things a lot of times is for them to be really iconic, and he's approaching it as an illustration.
Right.
And so, for instance, they take me, like, I'm sure way longer than what he does because I'm not as fast at doing illustrations, and because I'm approaching it as this, worked out, piece of art that I don't know. Again, I'm not putting his stuff down at all. He just has a different approach than me. And like when I did the self-titled album, I was really glad Mike had me come back and work on that. And I worked closely with him, and we talked a lot, and I showed him lots of sketches, and we went back and forth and refined it and refined it and refined it. And we ended up with something I feel proud of. And I think that, again, it's got that iconic quality to it.
Definitely.
I am very sure that he's not taking that kind of care with every poster, every,
Yeah, it might be a manager kind of role, getting that stuff figured out.
Yeah, I don't know, because all I know is that I don't know if I'd even want to do those posters. So it's not a matter of, I don't know. But
yeah.
I really don't. I really don't care that much, because they're great, and they're a different style than I do, and they would take me way too long if that's what they wanted. And so I'm fine with that. So yeah, I guess that's kind of probably more information than you wanted, but
no, that's awesome. I really appreciate your honesty with that, because that's probably a different response than you would get from a lot of artists. So that's cool that you have that integrity, and that it's just not worth, I guess, the fight for that, especially if it's not something you want to do anyways. So yeah, I'm curious as if there was other ideas for the self-titled album, or was it always something with the PXPX, with that specific image, or was there other ideas floating around? I don't know if you're allowed to mention that or not.
I remember that Mike's direction was that he wanted him to look like he was listening to music and enjoying it, and kind of stoked about the music. Other than that, I just had to figure out how to represent that. I don't remember if he or I came up with the idea of him having headphones on. It's possibly he did. He said that. And so there was iterations where I drew some where his whole body was showing, where he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and you were kind of looking at him shot from above.
Okay.
And Mike said, well, what if you have him popping out of something? And so it kind of developed like that. And I would have to go back and look at sketches, but one of the original sketches got used on, I think it was the test pressing cover, because I was working with Jason Zymet on all that packaging, and he was like, hey, it'd be cool for the test pressings to do one of the earlier sketches and use that as the cover. And so that's what we did. So if you have the test pressing, you have one of the earlier sketches that I did.
Oh man, that's cool. Well, I don't. I'm not a vinyl collector, but
Okay.
somebody's got a unique piece of art in their hands, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, well, we're gonna wrap things up, but I would love to hear, what your favorite MXPX albums are. Kind of assuming you've kept up with them over the years, or maybe it's songs or projects. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, as far as the impact of my life, I'd have to go back to that Pokinatcha, but because it was the start of this whole thing where it's affected so much of my life. But and it's crazy because it's just you never could predict this stuff. But I think if I had to pick one, I feel like when Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo came out, I was excited about it, that it might be a new, harder direction they were going in. And so I really liked that album a lot.
Yeah.
But I think also, with that said, I think Doing Time might be my favorite song,
Oh, so good.
which is not off of that album, but
Right.
when I see them live now, I just realize how incredible they are. Like, Mike's written so many great songs, and from their whole catalog, there's just incredible songs that are so fun, along the whole career. And so I don't know that I could really, other than saying Slowly Going, but also I really, really like the self-titled. And I don't know if it was partly because I was involved with it, and so it's kind of like, tainted my way of viewing it. But
Yeah.
I think when these punk bands, some of them get older and they're still making incredible music, it's so cool. I think, like Social Distortion, I think they just keep getting better and better. But that's, I'm sure somebody could argue with that. But I think that, and I told Mike this, I think he's at the top of his game.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, yeah, MXPX is my all-time favorite band, and so it's definitely hard to pick albums and songs because there's so many different. One really cool thing about MXPX is there's so many different eras of the band. From Life in General to the Switch and Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo, and then shifting to Ever Passing Moment, Before Everything and After, and I just love that about them. It makes it really fun to kind of dive into their discography, and so that's awesome that you've had so many opportunities to work with them. I just quickly wanted to mention just that I've always loved the Let It Happen artwork as well. I can remember when I got the first I guess pressing or whatever, because they re-released it a number of years later. But yeah, that album cover always stood out to me.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. I've heard that from other people too, and it's kind of funny because when I did that, I kind of was paranoid that the band wasn't going to like it because they were kind of left out of that process.
Right. Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Yeah, and so I was nervous about bumping into them sometime after that, and they didn't seem to care, and they're always so gracious and so nice to me. So I have nothing but love for those guys. But yeah, I felt weird about it, and I don't even know if I loved it that much when I did it. But I think the more people have said, how incredible it was for them, as an iconic, album cover, I've learned to kind of go, okay, well, I guess I agree with you now.
Yeah. How many album covers have you done for them? I'm just trying to, as you're talking, I'm just trying to picture all the ones, like, 'cause maybe you've done some, like, I can't remember if the second release of Let It Happen had your artwork on it or not.
Yeah, it did. The thing about that was that I think it was when Brandon was talking about doing a best of kind of thing after they left the label, he was talking about maybe doing a best of. I think that was the era where he hired me to do some different poses, and he paid me for 4 different poses, and I didn't know what they're going to be used on. I had no idea, but one of them is on that second Let It Happen, and another one is used on the 10 Years and Running.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Which is pretty cool that they've used that as a backdrop for a lot of their shows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember which maybe it's the Let It Happen. It has the Vespa drawing on the back or something.
Okay, yeah.
That was one of those 4. And the view where it's kind of shot from, or it's kind of a viewpoint above him where he has his hands in his pockets.
Okay, yeah.
I think that was the 4th one.
Okay.
So
yeah, man, that's all. It just makes you want to go back and look through my CDs here to see just what I can pick up. But yeah, well, John, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thanks for taking the time just to share and to go back into that memory vault. And yeah, I just always love just getting to hear stories about my favorite band from, back when they started up until now and everything in between. And so it's been really cool to have you on.
Well, I really appreciate it. I had fun with it. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I mean, even if it's just not related to me, it's like music and art is just so fun to talk about and to be into. And so I just really appreciate, you talking to me about it. So this is awesome.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks so much for taking the time again, and look forward to talking again and just keeping up with your artwork. And keep doing what you're doing because it's awesome.
Thanks. Appreciate it a lot.
What do you think, Lisa? Man, down with Hitler, all the way down.